Welcome to This Explainer. Look, if you've been feeling completely overwhelmed by life lately, you are exactly in the right place. Today, we're looking at the research and source material that diagnoses exactly why your 20s can feel so incredibly difficult. And we're going to validate those feelings using hard data, economics, and a little bit of biology. Let's get right into it. First, we have to confront a massive myth that society constantly feeds us. The idea that your 20s are supposed to be the glorious prime of your life. You know the drill, right? We're told it's an era of total freedom, fun, and boundless opportunity. But for a huge portion of us, the reality on the ground feels entirely different. It's filled with confusion and, honestly, a ton of pressure. And hey, we actually have the data to back that up. According to a 2017 LinkedIn study that gathered data from thousands of young adults, a staggering 75% of 25 to 33-year-olds have experienced severe emotional turbulence. Seriously, 3 out of 4? So if you feel like you're struggling right now, the numbers absolutely prove that you are overwhelmingly in the majority. You're not alone in this. Which brings us to our first section, the quarter-life crisis. To understand why this is happening to so many people, the sources explore the quarter-life crisis as a legitimate, measurable condition. Psychologists define this crisis as an intense, concentrated feeling of fear, loneliness, being utterly lost, and facing just overwhelming anxiety about the future. It's a deeply modern phenomenon. Think about it. You're suddenly thrust into an unforgiving adult world, realizing you might be stuck in a job you absolutely hate, all while being forced to constantly compare your messy, behind-the-scenes struggles to the seemingly flawless, curated lives of your peers online. Interestingly enough, the Harvard Business Review confirms that your 20s are actually the peak phase for negative emotions. It's the time when your emotional volatility is at its absolute highest. And get this, according to their data, these feelings usually don't even begin to stabilize until you reach your late 30s. All right, moving on to Section 2. The harsh economic reality. The first major root cause highlighted by the data is frankly completely out of your control. It's perfectly captured by the French economist Thomas Piketty's famous equation, R is greater than G. Now, what does that mean? It means that returns on capital, things like inherited wealth or property, are always greater than general economic growth and wages. Put simply, someone who just inherits wealth is going to easily outpace someone working grueling 12-hour days. This harsh reality means your starting conditions end up dictating your 20s way more than your own hard work. And complicating matters even further, modern capitalism demands that you trade your absolute best, most energetic years for the distant promise of a dignified retirement. But we're currently looking at a projected $400 trillion global savings gap over the next 30 years, according to the World Economic Forum. That's a massive shortfall, meaning even the basic promise of a comfortable retirement at the end of all this labor is fundamentally strained right now. Now let's look at Section 3, the biology of your 20s. As if the economic weight wasn't enough, researchers note your own physical biology is uniquely challenged during this decade. You see, in your 20s, the physical connections in your brain between your emotional centers and your prefrontal cortex, which is the logical decision-making part of your brain, well, they just aren't fully developed yet. That means you're biologically ill-equipped to make the most rational, calm decisions under the massive compounding pressures of building a career, navigating modern dating, and meeting heavy societal expectations. Your brain is quite literally still under construction, while society demands that you act like a finished product. That brings us to Section 4, the generational gap. At this point, you might logically be wondering why previous generations didn't seem to report this exact brand of psychological strain. Well, the sources point right to history. Your parents likely grew up in a 1970s economic system that heavily favored people with debt and featured significantly lower wealth inequality. Compare that to the post-1990s world that you inherited, which is defined by severe, expanding inequality, fierce job scarcity, and a vastly higher cost of living. You are quite literally playing a completely different game than they did. Let's take your grandparents, for example. They likely had a straightforward, highly predictable path mapped out for them that mirrored thousands of years of human history, maybe taking over a farm, marrying early, and settling down. You, on the other hand, are burdened with infinite choices. You're wrestling with modern debt, endless career pivots, and this exhausting modern requirement to constantly search inward to somehow find yourself. It's a lot. The sources show how this anxiety actually builds up throughout your entire life. It starts in childhood, a time when you naturally lived purely in the moment. But over time, society, schools, and the media slowly condition you to obsess solely over the future. By the time you hit your 20s, that conditioning locks in completely. You become plagued by a constant anxiety to produce and succeed, effectively transforming you into a perfectly stressed gear in the economic machine. We call this the future-oriented mindset. And honestly, this mindset is the ultimate psychological trap. It ensures that you're so incredibly paralyzed by tomorrow's potential failures, so utterly focused on where you'll be in 5 years, that you become completely blind to the beauty and reality of today. All of this pressure predictably leads many young adults into what the research identifies as the doomer mindset. This is a tragic, complete surrender to depression and isolation. It's the bleak belief that life is inherently ugly, the system is totally rigged, and therefore trying to find any sort of meaning or purpose is completely pointless. But here is the turning point. Section 5, Courage as the Cure. This is where the source material pivots from just diagnosing the problem to actually uncovering a cure. The French existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre perfectly captures this necessary transition with his quote, "Life begins on the other side of despair." Think about that for a second. Hitting rock bottom, experiencing that deep crisis, and losing your naive, rosy expectations of how the world should work, that's actually the beautiful, necessary first step to truly living a life of your own design. Statistical models map this out beautifully. They show that while life satisfaction violently plummets right now in your 20s and stress spikes entirely off the charts, forming an inverted U shape, this curve naturally corrects itself as you age. Your satisfaction does go back up. But, and this is a really big but, it only corrects if you actively arm yourself with one critical tool, and that tool is courage. So what does actionable courage actually look like? Well, it doesn't mean just giving up. It means bravely accepting that life has inherent ugliness and unfairness. It means actively refusing to be a slave to society's timeline. It means taking on tangible responsibilities, even really simple ones, like exercising, which gives your brain an immediate, necessary biological boost of positive hormones. And most importantly, it means playing the game of life for yourself, not for the validation of the audience around you. The author Elif Batuman gives us this brilliant analogy that can truly shift your entire perspective on this difficult decade. She suggests that every hardship, every rejection, and every unfair economic reality you face should be viewed simply as a heavyweight opponent, placed in the ring to train you. They are there for one reason: to build you into an Olympic-level survivor. The data clearly shows that your 20s are uniquely challenging by design. But the ultimate question the authors leave you with is this. Now that you understand the diagnosis and you clearly recognize how the system operates, are you going to let it crush you, or will you bravely step into the ring and forge your own path anyway?